pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic of the nation under God, indivisible.
Welcome, everybody, for the reorganization portion of our meeting. Mrs. Hall.
Call of holdover members of the board. Mike Donato,
Present.
Richard Garber,
Present.
Linda Johnson,
Present.
Charles Maris.
Present.
Welcome to the members of the public and to our special guests. The purpose of this annual organization meeting is to officially announce the election of the newly elected or re-elected members of the board, to swear in those members who have not already been sworn in, and to organize the board for the coming year by electing a permanent president and vice president. As you can see from the agenda for the organization portion of the meeting, we will not take up the regular legislative business of the board at this point. Immediately following the organization meeting this evening, we will be convening a regular meeting for that purpose. Do any resident requests to speak this evening address the reorganization proceedings that will occur in the next few minutes? So if not, all resident requests to speak will be heard during the regular meeting that will immediately follow the reorganization meeting.
The first order of business is to elect a temporary president from the holdover members only to chair the organization meeting. May I have nominations for the temporary president?
I nominate Mrs. Johnson for temporary president.
Any other nominations? May I have a motion to approve Linda Johnston, myself, as the temporary president?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Raise your hand, please.
The holdovers. So the holdovers.
Just the holdovers?
Just.
Okay. Sorry. Are the votes recorded?
Yes.
Yes, okay. With a vote of four, the motion passes. I am now the temporary president. Thank you. Our incoming members this evening, those of who are newly elected are re-elected to the seats on the board last month are Judy L. Brady, Megan L. Eschliman, Grant W. Keener, Patrick M. Wagner, Justin E. Vogelmuth. The board secretary will now read the certificates of election.
At this time, I will read the County Board of Elections of Lancaster County certificates of election as presented to each newly elected board member. We, the undersigned members of the Lancaster County Board of Elections, hereby certify that after tabulating the votes cast in the municipal election held on the 7th day of November, 2023, it appears that Judy L. Brady, Megan L. Eschliman, Grant W. Keener, Patrick Wagner, and Justin Wogelmuth were duly elected to the office of school director for Hempfield School District for a 4-year term. Mr. Wagner is unable to attend in person this evening, so his oath of office was done on Friday, December 1st.
Our guest of honor is District Justice Brian Chudzik, who will now administer the oath of office to the newly elected or re-elected members.
Yep. So if the new elected members come on up to.
Where do you want them, sir? Up here?
Sure. Great.
Okay.
Just gotta sign it, thanks.
Just why don't you come back in here a little bit so people can see you? It's easier to do.
Paul Freehold. State your name. I solemnly swear affirm. Do solemnly swear affirm. I will support, obey, and defend. Will support, obey, and defend. Constitution of the United States. Constitution of the United States. Constitution of the Commonwealth. Constitution of the Commonwealth. That will start to do my office of fidelity. I will start to do my office of fidelity. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir, for doing that for us. Congratulations to the new and newly elected members, re-elected members. At this, let's see, you already did that. You all have a draft copy in front of you of the Board of School Directors for the year now beginning at your seats. Please review your information and confirm accuracy with our school board recording secretary, Jacqueline Stragos, this evening, sometime this evening before you leave. Tonight's nominations and voting for the board president and vice president will follow Hempfield School District Board Policy 005, organization. Quote, election of officers shall be made by a majority vote of those present and voting. Where no such majority is achieved on the first ballot, a second ballot will be cast for two candidates who receive the highest numbers of votes. I will now open the floor to nominations for the office of president. May I have a nomination for board president?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I nominate Mike Donato for the position of board president.
Do we have a second? Second. Are there any other nominations for board president? I declare the nominations closed. As the nominations are closed and Mike Donato is the only candidate nominated, I moved for election by acclamation for the position of president. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
thank you. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Do we need to go through each person? Okay. All right, thank you.
That was annoying.
There were any opposed? With a vote of 9-0, Mr. Donato has been elected president. Congratulations, Mr. Donato.
Thank you.
Okay. I will now open the floor to nominations for the office of vice president. May I have a nomination for board vice president?
I would like to nominate Mr. Patrick Wagner.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Are there any other nominations for the office of vice president? I declare the nominations closed. As nominations are closed and only Pat Wagner is the candidate nominated, I move for election by acclamation for the position of vice president. May I have a motion to approve Pat Wagner as the nominee for vice president?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
this again is a voice vote. The secretary will record the votes. Those in favor say yes and raise your hand to be acknowledged.
Aye.
Yes.
Yes.
Aye.
There are no one's opposed. With a vote of 9-0, Mr. Pat Wagner has been elected president. Congratulations. I'm sorry, vice president. Gotta get that right. Congratulations to Mr. Pat Wagner.
Thank you.
I will now turn the meeting over to our new board president. Thank you. Do we want to take a break?
And we have to finish.
Oh, he has to do.
The next part of this meeting will be authorization, the use of the president's stamp until a new one is received. Could I request a motion that approving the use of the presidential signature stamp until a new one is completed, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnston. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. And could we have a vote, please? All those in favor, hands up.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries 9-0. Next is a motion to approve the designated the following as presented in items 6B and 6E represented. They're attached in there. 6B is the list of banks that the school district uses for district funds, which is First National Bank, Fulton Bank, Pennsylvania School District Liquid Asset Fund, and Pennsylvania Local Government Investment Trust. 6C is the paper that we're required to announce meetings in, and that's the Lancaster newspapers. 6D is the copy of the proposal for the schedules, which I believe we all received for the upcoming regular meeting schedule starting in January. And 6E is the appointment of committee members for both the standing committees, which is Buildings and Grounds and Finance, and also for the Education Programs, Policy, Personnel, and Legal Committee. So we need a motion to approve all of those, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Keener. Second.
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 Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. All those in favor, show of hands, please.
In favor?
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. Next is the appointment of the representative and adjunct committees. For this, here for Lancaster County Career and Technical Center Joint Operating Committee, the list is there. It's Mr. Keener, Mr. Garber is alternate. The LIU 13 is Mr. Maris. Hempfield Area Rec Commission is Mrs. Brady and Mr. Wagner. Safety and Security is Mr. Garber, and PSBA Liaison is Mrs. Eshelman. So again, need a motion to approve those committees.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Wagemuth, a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Eshelman. All those in favor? Show of hands.
In favor?
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. And last one, this does not require a voice vote with this. This is just to review the standing committee assignments. Buildings and Grounds Committee will be Mr. Maris, Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Wagamuth, and Mrs. Brady. Education and Programs Committee will be Mrs. Johnson, Mr. Garber, Mrs. Eshelman, and Mr. Wagner. Finance Committee, Mr. Wagamuth, myself, Mr. Maris, and Mrs. Brady. And Policy, Personnel, and Legal Committee will be Mr. Keener, Mr. Wagner, Mr. Wagamuth, and Mrs. Eshelman. And I guess any questions on that? This does not require a vote, but does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on. And this is going to conclude the reorganization meeting. So could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brady.
Second.
Thank you. So we don't get that, we'll just all sit here for the rest of the night. Okay, all those in favor, again, show of hands.
In favor?
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. Okay, we'll begin the next part of the meeting. We're not adjourning. It is at 7:25. And the teacher parted me. We'll have a 10-minute break. Thank you. So meeting's adjourned, or this meeting's Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Begin with the roll call. Beginning with the roll call, Mr. Wagner, are you still present?
I am still present. Thank you.
With that, everyone is still here in attendance. Since we've already had the pledge, we're not going to do that again, but you use this opportunity again to welcome Mrs. Brady, Mrs. Eshelman to the board as new members. There's a few years ago, actually probably a long time ago, there was a commercial for recruitment and for the Navy that said it's not just a job, it's an adventure. Well, your adventure begins tonight with it. And also congratulations to Mr. Keener, Mr. Wagner, and Mr. Wagamuth for being reelected again to the board. Before the meetings tonight, the board did meet in exec session to discuss a safety and security, several safety and security topics, and two student disciplinary measures. Next, requesting a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting tonight, incorporating any additions and deletions.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Can I take that as a second, Mrs. Johnston?
Yes, you may.
Okay. All those in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. And then next is a motion to approve the minutes for the last regular board meeting held November 14th. The Education and Programs and Policy and Personnel and Legal Committee meeting held on November 16th, and the minutes of the Buildings and Grounds and Finance meeting held on November 30th. So I need a motion to approve those, please.
Motion.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I missed.
Mr. Garber.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garber. Sorry. A second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Which I forgot in the first part. All those in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. Next, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bromurski for student and staff recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Donato, and good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going to begin with our student council officers. So Avery and Drew are with us. So welcome tonight, and I'll turn it over to start with Avery.
All right, so I believe it was 2 weeks ago we had our variety show, our annual like talent show, variety show, where we just like to showcase a bunch of the students across the school that have like talents that they'd like to perform, singing, instruments. We had like, dancing, everything like that. And unfortunately, I was unable to be in attendance to that, but it was super successful for both student council as well as the people involved. The top, like not the top acts, but there's a select acts that would like to. And we allow them to perform for the entire school the day before Christmas break. So that's another thing we're looking forward to. And then in the winter, we're establishing a new winter formal. A lot of schools around us and a lot of schools that we associate with or like talk to have like either a Sadie's dance in the winter or a winter formal here at the high school. And I know a lot of people I've talked to thought that would be a good idea to in-state. So we're trying to work on that and trying to make it not so much homecoming, but close to a homecoming as semi-formal cocktail dresses, stuff like that. And I can hear that there's a little excitement around that. So I just want to let everybody know that that's what we're working on right now.
Thank you. Okay.
Any questions for student council before we move on? Thank you. Next is residents' requests to address the board. The board provides a time of public comment for residents and taxpayers to bring their thoughts to the board, but is not a time for exchange between board administration and the speaker. We ask that the speakers refrain from identifying specific students, staff, or community members by name. Residents and taxpayers who are interested in making public comments must complete the electronic registration form prior to 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting. You'll have 5 minutes. If there's a clock up that you can see on both sides of the room to help you judge the time. And I believe there's 4 requests to speak to the board this evening, and Mr. Graham will carry on from there. Thank you.
Our first speaker this evening is Jean Pretz, who will be followed by Ollie Winditz.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jean Pretz. Thank you for the opportunity to be here, and congratulations to the newly elected and re-elected board members. I appreciate all the time you put in to the work for this community. I'm a resident in Hempfield. I'm a taxpayer, and I have 2 children in the district. I would like to speak about the bathroom policy that has been discussed in previous meetings. Based on decisions made by the previous board, I am very concerned about potential harm to members of the LGBT community. However, in light of the recent election and the change in the constitution of the board, I think it's clear that the public hasn't been pleased with some of the decisions made by the previous board. And so I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for the board to move in a new direction with the bathroom locker room policy. So I'm sure the reason this policy is under discussion is because some members of our community are worried about safety of our students, and I share that concern. Many people worry about the dangers to cisgender women in restrooms and locker rooms. It's human nature to be wary about things we don't understand, but being uncomfortable in a restroom is not the same as being unsafe. The mere existence of trans or non-binary students in a restroom, in a locker room, or anywhere does not put any student at risk. In an amicus brief published last week, December 1st, 2023, by 21 attorneys general representing states across the country, they examined 22 legal cases concerning facility policies like the one that you are discussing as a board. They found that in states that allow trans students to use the bathroom or locker room of their gender identity, so the most inclusive version of a policy, in those states where that's already the law, there were, quote, no reported instances of transgender students harassing others in restrooms or locker rooms, end quote. They reported that school administrators in 31 states found that, quote, public safety concerns are unfounded, as are concerns that students will pose as transgender simply to gain improper restroom access, end quote. It's understandable that some parents might fear the worst, but the reality is that trans and non-binary students are not predators. They just want to use the bathroom like the rest of us. The school should not be concerned about the safety of cisgender students, but rather trans and non-binary students. We know that these students are at great risk. In a 2022 survey of LGBTQ teenagers, nearly 2 in 3 trans and gender expansive youth reported being teased, bullied, or treated badly at school in the prior year. In a 2021 study, they found that denial of access to bathroom facilities significantly increased the odds of these students reporting depressive mood and attempted suicide. You may know that there were 2 suicides of LGBT students that happened this past fall. One of them was my friend's child. The school can't be the place that's creating that unsafe environment for students. Discriminatory bathroom policies also bring severe physical health risks. Almost 3 in 4 trans students in one study said they avoided school restrooms because they felt unsafe, and half of them later reported kidney problems because of holding it. We also know that discrimination in school settings negatively affects outcomes for education, lower GPA, more absenteeism, etc. If Hempfield adopts a policy that explicitly restricts bathroom access used based on sex assigned at birth, it will harm trans students in our district. If Hempfield adopts a policy that requires students to use a gender-specific bathroom of any kind, it will harm non-binary students, full stop. I know that Hempfield is concerned about the safety of and privacy of all of its students. It seems that when it comes to bathrooms, the only students at risk are those who are members of the LGBT community. I urge the board to be very careful about the message they send to these students by way of this policy. Thank you.
Ollie Winditz will be followed by Lynn Winditz.
Hello, In regards to the proposed bathroom policy, I do not see the necessity for one. This will only hurt me in the long run due to more potential harassment, and I thought you wanted all of your students to be safe and welcome in the school district. There is no problem with what bathroom I use currently, and why does it matter if I use the bathroom of my gender? I am not going into the bathroom to harass or harm anyone. I just have to use the toilet. If you would like something real to fix, fix the locks on the stalls with the money you have, so that all students feel comfortable using the bathroom.
Lynn Wenditz will be followed by our final speaker, Mike Kuhn.
Thank you for letting me speak, and I also want to say a great big welcome to the new board members. I look forward to seeing what change you can help bring in. A few weeks ago, I spoke at a rally at our state capitol for a bill package that some of our legislators are trying to pass regarding the bathroom, locker room, sports team, all of these that impact our trans students. My son had an instance at a school board meeting a few years ago when you guys were discussing the sports policy, where he was terrified to use the restroom and had to have, I don't know, 3 or 4 other allies escort him into the restroom so he could feel safe using the bathroom, which is a very basic human right. I want to read an excerpt from the speech I gave at that rally a few weeks back. I'm going to be honest, I was actually going to come up here and say some not very nice things to you, but I changed my mind last minute because I am hopeful that the new board will take steps to rectify some of the old board's mistakes, in my opinion. Again, my oldest, Ollie, is trans. He's a freshman this year. And at an age when all he should be worrying about is getting schoolwork turned in on time, which clubs he wants to join, and if he'll get a part in the spring musical, which he did. Instead, he's had to worry about which bathroom and locker room he's allowed to use, which sports team he's allowed to try out for, and which teachers or administrators are safe and supportive. Because Ollie is a trans in a school district, is a trans student in a school district that has made it quite clear how they feel about their LGBTQ+ students by passing anti-trans sports policies, removing inclusive language, rejecting the need for more social emotional support for students, and of course, banning books that feature any kind of queer representation. The district has told our children that there is something wrong with them and that they do not deserve the same opportunities and experiences as their cis-het counterparts. And I just want to point that out, that you may think that it doesn't impact these students, but I have firsthand accounts from my son and his peers, how your actions have made them feel over the last 2 years. And you all should be ashamed of yourself because you are telling these kids that they are not worthy and they are not deserving of your support and that they are less than their peers. And that is not right. No child should be made to feel that way. Ollie stood up at a rally in March at the Capitol steps and shared some of his story. He's also spoken in the media, news reports, newspaper reports, and radio features, and talked about what it's been like for him as an openly trans student, how he's been made to feel unsafe in school, how he's been sexually harassed, and how administrators have made him feel that it is not an issue for anyone except him. He's had to fight the school board and the district for basic rights that every other student has. And that's not right, because he shouldn't have to. He is 15 years old and he's been fighting this for 2 years now, guys. Since he was 13, He has had to stand up here and make his voice heard. That shouldn't be on him. That shouldn't be on any of our kids. That's our responsibility as the adults in their lives. We are the ones who should be standing up here and saying, this isn't right. This is not how we treat our children. But he's had to stand up here because other people have told him that he is not deserving of being treated the same. Again, shame on all of you. All I want as a parent, all I want as a taxpayer and a resident of this school district is for all of our kids to feel inclusive. Thank you.
Mike Kuhn.
Good evening. I'm also going to give my thoughts on the bathroom policy. In recent years, the debate surrounding the rights of transgender students, particularly their access to gender-appropriate bathrooms in high schools, has gained significant attention. This issue goes beyond restroom facilities. It is about fostering an inclusive and supportive environment for all students. We need to recognize and respect the rights of transgender students to use bathrooms that align with their gender identity in high school. Transgender individuals, including students, have the right to be treated with dignity and respect. Denying them access to bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity can result in feelings of exclusion and discrimination, impinging them upon their fundamental human rights. Transgender inclusive policies are not a safety risk. If they were, we would know by now, as transgender people have been using public bathrooms and locker rooms for decades. Policies that allow transgender people to use the correct bathroom, the bathroom that matches the transgender person's identity, do not legalize harassment, stalking, violence, or sexual assault. Those behaviors are and will continue to be against the law for anyone, anywhere. Hundreds of cities, school districts, and 18 states already protect transgender people's rights to use restrooms, and none have seen a rise in incidents of people attacking anyone or of people pretending to be transgender in order to get access to restrooms. Law enforcement officials and sexual assault advocates in states and cities that already have trans-exclusive policies in place had said over and over, the claim that these policies cause safety problems is absurd and completely false. Offering separate or private bathrooms is a great way to ensure anyone can feel comfortable when they go to the bathroom, whether or not they're transgender. However, private bathrooms may be unavailable or very inconvenient to access. More importantly, forcing transgender people to use private bathrooms when other people do not have to isolates and reinforces the idea that transgender people are somehow harmful and should be kept separate from everybody else. Access to appropriate bathroom facilities is crucial for the mental well-being of transgender students. Being forced to use restrooms inconsistent with their gender identity can contribute to anxiety, stress, and a sense of isolation, negatively affecting their overall mental health. High schools should strive to create inclusive environments where all students feel accepted. Providing transgender students with the right to use bathrooms aligned with their gender identity contributes to a culture of acceptance, fostering a sense of belonging among all students. A supportive and inclusive school environment positively impacts the educational success of students. When a transgender student feels affirmed and respected, they are more likely to focus on their studies and engage in the educational process, ultimately benefiting the entire school community. Concerns regarding the implementation of policies that support transgender students' bathroom rights can be addressed through thoughtful communication and education. Providing information and fostering understanding among the school community can help dispel misconceptions and create a more supportive atmosphere. So in conclusion, recognizing and respecting the rights of transgender kids to use bathrooms in high schools that align with their gender identity is a crucial step towards creating inclusive and supportive educational environments. By prioritizing human rights, mental health, and legal protections, high schools can contribute to the well-being and success to all students, regardless of their gender identity. Embracing diversity and fostering understanding is not just a legal obligation, but a moral imperative for a more equitable society. And on a side note, I would like to ask if the board can Can the board explain about the literary analysis Heroes and Legends Lit course and why it's not on the agenda? Because we're running out of time for it to be on the schedule next year. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who made the public comments. Next, we'll turn it back to Mr. Bomersky for the superintendent's report.
Thank you again, Mr. Donato. And again, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. Want to just provide some updates from a district standpoint. First, we had an outstanding fall athletic sports season with all of our teams. We had almost all of our teams went into postseason play, and our girls volleyball team made it to the semifinals, did an outstanding job, and we were just proud of all of our students who participated in the fall season. At the same time, our winter season is well underway, and so we will be seeing some of our fall athletes as well as some of new athletes who are just participating in winter sports be starting to compete. And so I encourage all of you to come out and support our students. In addition, over the next several weeks, we have holiday concerts occurring in all of our buildings across our district. As board members, make sure you get all of those dates. They are on our district calendar. But for our community, we encourage you to come out and support our students and see all the great work that they've been working hard to share with our community. It's a great time to be able to come and celebrate our students. So we encourage you to come and attend those events. I also want to let everybody know, I know we have shared this information, but at the start of the school year through the community eligibility provisions and partnerships, we had 5 of our schools where all the students in that school, regardless of parents' income levels, we received free lunches. All the students in the state of Pennsylvania get free breakfasts, but we had 5 schools that qualified through a federal program for free lunches. And I'm pleased to report that thanks to our Director of Food Services, working with her team, working with Mrs. Hall, we have been approved now for all of our buildings in the district. So every student in our district not only gets free breakfast, but every student gets free lunch, regardless of parents' income level, and parents do not have to pay for that lunch. Parents do have to pay for snacks, ice cream, and all those extras. But from a lunch standpoint, all of our students in the district get free lunch.
Mr. Bomersky, that's already in effect, correct?
Correct.
Have we seen an uptick in meal participation for either meal since that has happened?
In a conversation that I had with Mrs. Melendez, that answer is yes. Mrs. Hall?
For the first 5 buildings, we saw for the first 5 buildings that went CEP, we saw a pretty significant increase.
Okay.
I don't know yet since it was just new for the other buildings, but we anticipate to see the same thing.
They've said
Okay,
it's been
thank you.
quite busy in the last couple of days.
Mr. Keener, in my household, within the week, they have asked to buy more lunch. They have asked to have school lunches more.
But the question, Mrs. Eshelman, are they reallocating the lunch money to the ice cream and drinks and snacks?
Well, I was informed that that money that is in their account can be,
Can be refunded to parents should you wish. There is information
thank
on
you.
our district
Limit
website under food services on how to do that if parents wish to do that. And so I just wanted to share that because that was definitely a lot of great work done by Mrs. Melendez, our food service team, to make that happen. So it's great information. The last piece that I just wanted to share, I know it was talked about at a recent policy committee meeting. I know there's been some information circulating online and through media, but I just want to be clear with our community. There is no current bathroom policy before the board. The board tasked the administration to work with our solicitor, who's with Stock and Leader, to do the homework, do the research, to look at what's out there and bring information back to the school board at an upcoming policy meeting on December 14th. That is what we are doing. We are engaging those discussions, those conversations. So we will bring information back to the board for discussion and for items for consideration for the board. But at this point, there is no policy in front of the board. So I just want to be clear with everybody that we have work to do, and that was tasked to us, and we are doing that. And we will report back on December 14th. You have the agenda of meetings, this calendar of events. We have 2 more meetings after this one in December. Moving forward at future meetings, now that the meeting schedule has been approved during the reorganization meeting, we will begin adding those to the agendas and getting that all populated on our calendars. And then you actually also have the December enrollment count so that you could see what our enrollment numbers look like K to 12. If there's any questions, I can certainly answer them at this point based on the information that I shared.
Any questions? Student council, do you have any questions?
Is that a few people, like, I know a lot of people that have been talking about it, like people that normally pack or normally anything like that. And I've seen like an increase in people getting lunches, like the line's definitely a little longer, so.
Yes.
Wonderful. Good. Yep. Okay. Anyone else?
Great. Thank you. That concludes the superintendent's report.
Okay. President's report, I'll save my 27-page agenda for some other time. That's an old joke from previously. So we're going to move on to representative and adjunct reports. First is Lancaster Career and Technology Center, Mr. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. The Joint Operating Committee does not meet in November. However, a reorganization and December meeting will be held next Monday, December 11th at Willow Street. So I will have an update at the January board meeting.
And Mr. Keener, just because I have one question, just because it came into my mind, if we remember back for the state to provide funding, is there any more progress with that?
Actually, I hope to have a significant update on that in January.
Okay, that would really be great because
Yeah.
going back for the new board members and even to refresh, it's the CTC has a capacity issue. They have actually more kids than what they have space to do. And I
am
think,
hopeful to be able to provide an
Yeah.
update in January.
and I think that's a problem for not just ours, but all over the state. So they're looking at ways, hopefully to get the state to approve more money so they can increase programs.
And Mr. Donato, with that, Mr. Keener, also the preliminary budget for the CTC, will you be reporting on that back to the board in January?
Yes.
Thank you.
We have not yet received the budget presentation. I think that's probably going to happen next week.
Thank you. Next, IU 13, Mr. Maris.
We did not meet since we met last. I gave a report at our November 14th meeting, but we meet not this Wednesday, next Wednesday.
Okay, thank you. Hempfield Area Rec Commission, Mrs. Johnson or Mr. Wagner.
I'll chime in. I can and will provide a more comprehensive report during our January meeting, as we do not meet for the rec center this month. So I can provide a report from our November 29th meeting. Then when I'm in person, it'll be clear and easier to communicate. But just a heads up, our next meeting as a board will be on Wednesday, the 24th of January, as we go every other month. That is it for now, and I'll have again a comprehensive report next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Safety and Security, Mr. Garber.
Nothing new to report.
Okay, TSBA, Mr. Wagamuth.
I have nothing to report except that everyone that was elected needs to complete their training, which they're well aware of.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to standing committees, Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Maris.
Yeah, we met a week ago. Mrs. James provided information on the Siemens proposal for a building automation system for Lansing Primary Center and Lansing Middle Schools. Current plan is to replace them in the summer of 2024. Says here, quote, for replacement was presented to the board in preparation for voting for December regular board meeting, but I don't see that it is there. Okay, so we'll address that in a little bit. Feasibility study update. Mr. Behrens was here from Breslin, answered questions, talked about the feasibility study, and there is an action item to accept that feasibility study. And also Mrs. James talked about the LPC playground update. I believe things have gone well there and the kids are having a blast with it. So do we go into the action item next?
No.
Okay, that's later.
Okay, any questions? Okay, moving on, finance, I'll do that. Just a couple things with finance meeting. First, we discussed, and this is a financial action item that we'll be voting on separately when we get to that part, as we're allowed to increase taxes beyond index, but we're passing a resolution basically that we will not raise taxes for the coming year above index. That is a financial action item to approve, which we had a discussion about that in finance. The other part we did in finance is because of need in the in the district, I shouldn't say in the high school, but in the district, excuse me, the administration is asking us for approval to seek an additional speech therapist. Reason for that basically is because we need to be in compliance with the kids' IEPs. And if we don't approve it, we will not be in compliance with the kids' IEPs. And I believe that was all for the finance committee meeting. Any questions for me? Okay. Next meeting, again, for both buildings and grounds and finance is on the 19th of this month. Next is education and programs, Mrs. Johnston.
I have a question of Dr. Musser. I noticed that we are approving a speech and language pathologist for Farmdale. So that brings us into compliance.
Yes, no, that is the replacement position.
There's
How about now? That is the replacement position. After the approval for tonight, then we'll be looking to secure that additional request.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Report. Things are going well. I'm pleased with the reports, with the state reports. We were all 80%, which is great. I spoke with Mr. Hoffman before the meeting, and he was very happy about what's going on in our elementary schools. The pilot program is going well. Things seem to be, pretty well humming along nicely, but we will continue to receive data and reports about how the elementary school is doing with their pilot program. And hopefully we will have a new speech therapist the next time we meet, maybe not in December, but in January for sure. So that's all. Thank you.
any questions? Okay, moving on, policy, personnel, and legal, Mr. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. Donato. As you can see from the minutes that were approved earlier, we will be voting on second reading consideration today on several sort of routine updates to policies with no substantive changes: food allergy management, diabetes management, medication, class rank, promotion and retention. Two policies, one relating to graduation and one relating to weapons, that were scheduled to be discussed at next Thursday will be deferred to the January meeting at the request of the board. So despite what the minutes say, policy 217 graduation and 218.1 weapons will be deferred to the January policy meeting. And as Mr. Bomirski said, the solicitor will be bringing back several draft policies for board discussion at our December 14th meeting relating to facilities usage. And for second reading tonight of note, for Ms. Landis and Mr. Benchich and their student council colleagues, the student council's right of voice will be memorialized in board policy upon the second reading of policy 228 tonight. Any questions?
Questions? I think Mr. Keener, Ms. Landis, when you said graduation requirements, she's sitting there thinking, she sort of looked like, okay, does this mean I've got to take 14 courses between now and? Yes, it does. That's exactly what it means.
We're not supposed to know.
Oh,
that
okay,
yet.
I'm sorry. So yeah, just starting in the second half of the year, you'll be taking lots of classes with, no, I'm just kidding with it. Okay, moving on then. Personnel action items. I'm looking for approval to approve personnel action items 9A, 1 through 10.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Keener. Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson.
Mrs. Brady.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mrs. Brady. Any discussion? Give you a moment to look. Okay. All those in favor, show of hands, please. Mr. Wagner?
In favor.
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. And now we're going on to the financial items. In the beginning, going to ask for approval. There's a couple we're going to vote on separately. So the beginning is to approve financial items 10B through 10F as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Maris. Second, please. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
In favor.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. Okay, next will be to approve. It's item 10G, the wrestling team. It's an additional overnight trip. They'll be going to the Virginia Dual Meets in Hampton, Virginia in January of next year, with an expected expense for lodging being $3,900 change. So need a motion to approve that. This is
I just have a point of
sure,
information. Why is this listed as a standalone voting item?
because this, if I understand correctly, this in the original budget, we're going to following through, there's additional wrestling trips in there that was budgeted for, and in the athletic budget for this is an additional trip that wasn't in the athletic budget. And so it's basically to have discussion.
Right, and I do understand that, Mr. President, but the speech therapist position was also not in the budget, and we included that on the consent calendar.
That was
So I'm curious why
that
this
was
item is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Keener. Sorry to interrupt. That was discussed at the committee meeting. This was not. This came in right after.
Okay.
So that's why we
Okay.
wanted to make sure
Okay.
there was opportunity.
Thank you. That's okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. First by Mr. Wagamus, second by Mr. Maris. Discussion?
Are other
Uh, Yeah. I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I think I have a feeling that what was going to be said was pretty much going to be echoing exactly my sentiment. So I'll let you go and then I'll fill in if not.
Okay,
thank
go ahead,
you.
Mrs.
Are other teams taking additional trips? Have other trips been approved for other teams in the past? Beyond what was originally budgeted?
Nothing was approved for this school year. I'm not sure if for the previous school year. I believe we may have done this last year for wrestling. Correct.
For wrestling?
Yeah. It does. I will say this, but again, if you approve this and the girls' basketball team or be something in the spring, and it wouldn't even necessarily have to be a basketball, the sports team, if an activity wanted to approve it. Again, if it was in the same amount of range, I'd find it very difficult to say no to them for that reason. But that's just my thought with it.
I thought we've approved some money for sports trips in the past, maybe not this past year, but am I remembering incorrectly?
There hasn't been anything this year. It was prior years that we have.
Right.
And when it's an unbudgeted expense, so the boosters are covering a portion, our athletic budget is covering a portion, but this is higher than what was budgeted. And so just coming back for full disclosure with the board and seeking that additional
Understood.
approval is what's being asked.
This is not a playoff type trip.
Correct.
It's
It was an invitational, national invitational, that our team placed last year, and so they were invited back.
Okay, so I'm not opposed to this. I believe in creating opportunities for all of our students, but I guess I'm just, from a procedural point of view, they went last year. They presumably have an expectation of being invited back. why was this not built into the budget? And maybe the athletic director or the head coach should be here to provide additional clarity on that. I don't know. I
So-
mean, I'm not opposed to the request. I'm just slightly uncomfortable with the procedural posture of it. of the
No,
whole thing.
typically boosters cover portions, the district covers portions and that's worked out. And so the boosters are covering additional trips and that was shared with you on Friday. They're covering 2 other trips. And so they asked that the district cover the lodging for this expense. And Dr. Musters worked with Mr. Landis, who will work with the coaching moving forward as to which ones the district will cover in the future and which ones will be the sole responsibility of the boosters.
Thank you.
Yep.
Later in the agenda under action items, simply because they're overnight trips, item G in there is for approval for, and the Booster Club, I believe these are the
Those are
2
other-
tournaments that are
yep.
being covered, and we're
Correct.
just approving it because it's an overnight trip. This is because the financial thing. Any other questions?
I do have another question. I'm noting that it says that the coach transportation is paid for by the district, but that the 3909 is to cover lodging.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there additional cost then for the coach?
We have that in the budget.
The coach is
That
already
is
in the budget.
This is the additional for lodging because the boosters picked up the other 2 trips.
Additional questions?
No, no questions. Just I'll kind of finish my thought or kind of continue the thought that was already touched on by a couple folks already, and that is that I am in favor of approving this. And as Mr. Keener said, you know, we're always in favor of making sure that we can provide opportunity to our students, our student athletes, or various clubs or groups. I think it's great. I just want to go on record that, you know, to be cognizant of the bowling team, the band, the dance teams, the swim team, right? I just want to make sure that we're all just recognizing the fact that like there's a lot of clubs, a lot of teams, and I want to make sure that it does feel like the wrestling team goes, you know, they go away a lot overnight, and so I want to make sure that the other clubs and teams know that they can also be accepted in invitational tournaments and shows and things like that. And so again, I just kind of want to go on record that although I approve this, I want to make sure that other groups, other teams, can also come forward and request these things. And I want to make sure that we're also going to provide parity in our approval of those as well.
On the basis of Mr. Wagner's comments, which are of course valid, have we ever told a team, a course, a band ensemble, no, you can't go because we didn't budget for you to, because you did so good?
No, we've asked teams to seek other opportunities from a financing standpoint, which is what we do consistently. And then anything that we can't, we bring back to the board for discussion and potentially approval.
Have we ever disapproved anything? I know that parents and
don't
they
recall.
raise money and they do all sorts of things. The boosters are very active.
I don't recall them.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Keener?
Thank you. And this would be a discussion for another time, but I wonder if it's worth thinking about as we develop the athletic budget for next year, creating a reserve in the athletic budget for these sort of unanticipated or uncertain contingent expenses. Because frankly, I mean, I don't know that it makes sense for the board to be getting involved in a $4,000 expenditure, but rather saying, okay, this is the level that we're willing to fund this at. The coaches put their budget request in. If something else comes up, there's a reserve. And when the reserve is exhausted, well, then that's the end of the trips. And unless there's some truly exceptional circumstance. Just a suggestion for future discussion.
I like the idea of the reserve. I probably would be hesitant on capping that off, only because since I've been part of this board, we've had a posture of trying to allow those kids, when they've been successful, to have additional opportunity, whether that's an approved overnight trip or it's supporting it with some level of expense when they've made a good faith effort to fund that trip. So I haven't seen any wavering in that posture since I've been part of this board. And it sounds like in the past, that's been a similar sentiment. So I would like us to be able to see those young men and women and anyone in between is able to, that they're able to take the opportunity to go to a tournament or something whenever, the opportunity presents. So I'd be hesitant on the cap, but I like having a little bit of extra because sometimes you don't know if you're going to get invited to these or you don't know how well the teams are going to perform.
I guess just that to go back to my original thought, while I think it may very well be appropriate, again, you have to, if the band would come and have an activity or a club would have an activity, again, to the kids there, kids play sports hopefully because they like it and it's great advantage, but kids that are in band and participate in clubs for exactly the same reason. So, yeah, that's something if we look at, we got to look at, in my mind, all the contingencies with it.
I would just like to say one thing as the board's considering this, the administration here at Hempfield has full faith in our athletic department that they can go to the championship state level every year and are budgeted as such. These are more invitational type things that we're talking about. There's never an opportunity from a team overachieving the district is not fully budgeted and prepared to address. This is looking more kind of the invitational side of things.
That's helpful.
Okay, any other discussion? Sure.
2 parts to that. So I just want to make sure that when we're spending money on the wrestling team, because I know our wrestling team does pretty well usually, and that we're like making sure, like he said, that we like fund for like when they do well, they go to states and everything like that. But when they like decide to go into tournaments just for invitational or just to like help them out, like help the team out, make them better, like making sure that like all the teams know that they have like a resource they can come to, just to make sure all the teams know that like they can enter these things because they have another resource and it's not just the wrestling team found like a way that they can like keep entering tournaments, if that makes sense. Like, because this is an invitational and they could like join, they could like ask to be a part of other tournaments than just like to know that it will be funded, whereas like other teams might not know they have that resource. So I just want to make sure that we kind of make sure that all the teams know they have that resource.
So what you're saying is share
That's-
the wealth so everyone
Yeah.
knows.
I think that's very well said. Quite honestly, really well said. It's exactly the point I was chiming in with. I think you've summarized that beautifully, and it's really important to your point that others know that they have that same opportunity. It's got to be parity.
I just want to chime in. Our athletic director's not here, but I would think most of the athletes and coaches know that there's that support there. And I don't believe they feel that there's not. So if there is not that support, I'd certainly like to know about that.
I don't believe that they don't think that there's no support, because I know like from the softball team and everything like that, like, and all of my coaches, my coach is actually my father. So like we know like very well, and I just think we don't think we're not supported, because that's obviously not the case. We're obviously very supported here at Hempfield. And we're grateful for that. I just think that if we knew that we could enter tournaments as a softball, I don't think we know that we can enter tournaments as a softball team because we have a very small booster club budget. And so we feel like we can't do a lot. So like knowing that there's like a resource that we could like, not so much like, just like send a little thing out to remind coaches, just like, hey, coaches, like kind of encourage us to do well. Cause when we enter tournaments, that like makes the team better because we play harder teams and makes us like perform better. So I feel like, we feel supported, just to make sure that we know like everybody has the like accurate knowledge, because my dad this is only his like 2nd year as a head coach, so I feel like the new coaches coming in might not know that as well as like the wrestling coaches or anything like that. So just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. There could be a way to look at that. A booster club has to do a certain percentage of the funds.
Correct.
And that way it's not every tournament, but there has to be a commitment on both partnerships.
That's why on this one we brought it, because the boosters are paying for the other 2.
Does every athletic team have a booster club? Does something like tennis or bowling, is there a booster club to support their finances?
I think that varies from year to year and parent participation in numbers, but there's generally some group of boosters assisting in some of the athletic pieces. I can look into that more and put something in board news.
May recall, I believe it was a year or two ago, the
Where
bowling
we
team-
got money for the bowling?
bowling team, boosters paid for a portion, the board paid, approved a portion for them to go to nationals for the students who qualified. So we look at those Mr. Landis works with the teams and coaches through that, and then we'll bring it to, through Dr. Musser to the board.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, there was motion to approve and it was second. So all those in favor, show of hands.
In favor.
Okay, I believe that was carries 9-0. Okay, next one is item H, the resolution to adopt accelerated budget opt-out that we will not raise our taxes beyond the current index that the state allows us to for the upcoming 24-25 school year. So need a motion to approve that, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Wagamus. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Tu, the second was. Mr. Maris. Okay, thank you, Mr. Maris. Any discussion?
Could you remind us of what that index number is, please?
6.3%.
Mike's on. Okay, any other questions?
Just to clarify, that doesn't mean our taxes are gonna be 6.3.
It just means they'll be somewhere under 6.3.
No promises of amount, just we can't go higher than that. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, all those in favor?
In favor.
I believe that motion also carries 9-0. Moving on, there's no buildings and grounds action items to approve. And last part, other action items, motion to approve items B through G. And again, we're approving those wrestling trips that are last things on there because they're simply overnight trips and they're being paid for by the Booster Club, the Wrestling Booster Club. So need a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Maris. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Mr. Wagner?
In favor. In favor.
Motion carries 9-0. And motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
I beat you, Pat.
I
Thank
don't
you.
think so, Mr. Maris.
Thank you, Mr. Maris, and thank you for the second, Mr. Wagner.
Certainly.
Do I
Very
have a
good.
motion to show of hands, please? We're not discussing. Thank you. And Mr. Wagner, do you agree to adjourn?
Should I be the one that does it? No, I'm just kidding. No,
That's okay. Then
motion-
it's 8-1 and we're still adjourning.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. Well, have a good night, everyone. And Mrs. Eshelman, Mrs. Brady, welcome to the board.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Motion carries at least 8-1, no 9-0, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
Have a great night. Thank you.